Right, well, hello there. Let's talk about Chapter 12 from Coutura et al. 2020, titled Global Marketing Management, Planning and Organisation. And we're deliberately putting this chapter forward and out of order with the other chapters because we need to flag that the planning and organisation of global marketing and effective management of global marketing needs to happen well in advance of actually doing global marketing. All right, so let's get going. Right, so in this chapter we have 4 learning objectives: how global marketing management differs from international marketing management. We recognise the need for planning to achieve organisational goals. We look at the important factors for each alternative market entry strategy, and we flag the increasing importance of strategic alliances. So, global marketing management, one of the major points of contention in global marketing management is the question of standardization versus adaptation. So in the 1970s, that was the predominant question for global marketers, and in the 1980s, that sort of evolved to the question of globalization versus localization. And in the 1990s, it evolved into global integration versus local responsiveness. So that was a trend towards localization. So the debate about standardization versus adaptation is actually a really good example of ethnocentrism of American managers. What I mean is, for example, for European marketers or for Japanese business people, markets are by definition international, and the special requirements of the powerhouse that the American market is must be considered from the beginning. For European and, for example, Japanese. But in America, international marketing requirements may well be an afterthought. It's not necessarily the wisest move, but unfortunately that is what happens. All right, so here we've got a graphic showing competition among soft drink bottlers in India. It's fiercely competitive in that market, and Coke and Pepsi combine to ruin the view of the Taj Mahal, unfortunately. But the red of the Coke definitely stands out, and Coke actually purchased a prominent local brand, Thumbs Up, as a strategy for the organisation to achieve dominance in the market. So the red is a substantial competitive advantage both on the store shelves as well as the outdoor advertising. And we're not sure who borrowed the monsoon/thunder slogans from who, so that question still remains. Here we've got an example of adaptation by Mattel. So the picture shows Disney Princess collection on display at the Licensing International Show at New York's Javits Convention Center. And Mattel's strategic approach to the Bratz brand entry on the marketplace and Disney's ethnically diverse lines was twofold. What they did to begin with was that they sued Bratz, who is owned by MGA, with an intellectual property rights claim, And that lawsuit lasted 9 years. And the outcome of that court case was that only legal fees were awarded to MGA with no damages. And in response, MGA is planning more legal action regarding the Brat's loss of brand equity during those years of legal dispute. Mattel also bought the rights to produce the princess dolls, so the Disney princesses have been selling well due to Mattel's marketing efforts. Right, so in terms of this question of standardization, adaptation, localization, for example, we as astute marketers and managers need to definitely consider market segmentation above and beyond country borders. So as the information explosion allows marketers to segment more precisely, it's really only the manufacturing or the finance managers in an organization who will argue the standardization is the best way to go. And they make that argument because of economies of scale. From the marketing perspective, however, the most precise segmentation is customization to meet the needs of one. In other words, mass customization. We believe that things are actually simpler than that, however, because global markets, as they continue to homogenize and diversify simultaneously, the best organizations avoid the trap of focusing on country alone as the primary segmentation variable. So other segmentation variables that may well be more fruitful include, for example, region, city, climate, maybe language, media habits, or demographics, such as age or income. We've got an example here of Nestle, and what Nestle aim to do is evolution, not revolution. So Nestle was very much international from its beginning in 1866. Their overall goal was to dominate markets, and they used 4 ways with regards to their strategy. They focused on the long term, they deliberately decentralized, they focused on their core competencies, but they also adapted to local tastes. Now, currently, Nestle sells more than 2,000 brands and operates across 86 different countries. It's the world's biggest marketer of infant formula, powdered milk, instant coffee, chocolate, soups, and mineral waters. It ranks second in ice cream and in cereals. It ties with Ralston Purina and is just behind Kellogg's. So its products, maybe surprisingly, are sold from the range of upscale supermarkets in Beverly Hills in California to third world country huts in, for example, Nigeria. Turning to the benefits of global marketing. Global marketing, when we're doing global marketing, when we're seeking to effectively manage our global marketing efforts, knowledge is what helps scale the production and the marketing efforts for multinationals. Global diversity in marketing talent also leads to new and effective approaches across the markets that they're seeking to enter. And improved coordination and integration of marketing allows for a transfer of knowledge across the countries. So this gives marketers access to what might be considered some of their toughest customers, and financial benefits can be derived from a diversity of markets when we take this approach. Of course, we have to begin with planning. And planning is a systemized way of relating to the future. We manage the impact of external changing market conditions that are outside of our control, because we deliberately manage how we react, because this has a direct impact on the organisation and what the organisational strengths and weaknesses are, as well as the objectives we set out to achieve. In planning process, we formulate goals and the methods to achieve those goals. So we put a commitment of resources to a country market to allow for a rapid growth of international function. There's various levels of planning when we're doing global marketing. At the corporate level, they'll be more focused on the long-term, generalized organizational objectives as a whole. But then at the level of managers, strategic planning is undertaken. Strategic planning with regards to the use of resources such as capital to achieve long-term and short-term goals. Then taking a step down from the corporate level to the management level, down into the functional level, then we need to put in place tactical planning. So this is done locally, and we're addressing, for example, marketing strategies and advertising strategies. These actions and the allocation of appropriate resources are put to work to implement our strategic goals in specific markets. In terms of organizational objectives and resources, it's important to define what objectives we're seeking to achieve. This clarifies the orientation of domestic as opposed to international divisions, but it also permits consistency across organizational policies. Now, one of the issues that we face is that the organizational objectives and resources might not match the foreign market opportunities. So we have to adjust our objectives accordingly and alter the scale of our international plans. Sometimes we may even abandon a foreign market because it just doesn't well fit the organization. So the lack of well-defined objectives has found companies rushing into promising, or what looks like promising, foreign markets, only to find activities conflict or maybe detract from the overarching or primary organizational objectives. One market may offer immediate profits but have a poor long-term outlook, while another market may be the reverse. So we need to do our homework and we need to be strategic. In terms of international commitment, definitely required for a successful international operation. Managers must determine willingness to commit from the upper levels of the organisation, the leadership team. They have to attain commitment with regards to investment in finances and personnel for management purposes. And there needs to be a strong determination to stay in the market long enough to achieve a profit turnover. So of course the planning that goes into an international move, an international expansion, the planning that goes into an international expansion will impact the degree of commitment. A company uncertain of its prospects is likely to enter a market timidly, using inefficient marketing methods, channels, or organisational forms, and this really sets the stage for a failure of that venture that might well have succeeded with full commitment. So any long-term marketing plan should be fully supported by the leadership team and set realistic time goals for sales growth. Occasionally, of course, casual market entry may well be successful, but more often than not, market success requires long-term commitment. All right. So in the planning process, we need to recognise, is this organisation a first-time foreign marketer? Do they need to begin with determining the products to develop and which markets to target? Do they need to identify their level of resource commitment? Whereas organisations that are already committed to international expansion will allocate effort and resources amongst countries and products. They are at the stage of choosing new market segments and maybe introducing new products to develop. Maybe they're also recognising other products that they need to abandon in particular markets. So there's a systematic process for planning for global marketing. And this planning process is important for both companies that are at the beginning stage or at the already committed stage. The first phase is a preliminary analysis and screening process. So at this stage, organisations are evaluating the potential of foreign markets. They are analysing the environment in which the company plans to operate. And of course, the organisation and the country's needs must be matched. So an organisation's strengths and weaknesses, their products, their organisational culture and modes of operations, as well as organisational objectives, must be matched with the country's constraining factors and market potential. Phase 2 is about defining the target markets and adapting the marketing mix accordingly. In phase 2, potential target markets are identified and we do some more homework, more analysis. The marketing mix is evaluated as appropriate or not for each target market, and the analysis answers questions about the required adaptation. So questions that might be considered include, for example, are there identifiable market segments that allow for common marketing mix tactics across a number of countries? Which cultural and environmental adaptations are necessary for successful acceptance of the marketing mix? And will adaptation costs allow for a profitable market entry? So based on the results of this phase, a second screening of countries may take place, with some countries dropped out for further consideration maybe later down the track. When we move into phase 3 of this planning for international expansion, we are at the development of the marketing plan stage. So we have our target markets identified and those options are deliberately narrowed, and the marketing plan is developed for those specific narrowly defined markets. Of course, we begin with a situation analysis, and that means beginning with a macro environmental analysis and then moving into an industry analysis. This culminates in selection of the entry strategy and the specific action program. We're doing this to establish what needs to be done by whom, how, and when. And we're definitely going to include budget and expectations for sales and profits. After we get past this point, the company may actually decide not to enter the market because the plan may reveal that the objectives and the goals cannot be met. So just as the case is in phase 2, a decision not to enter a specific market may be made if it's determined that the organizational marketing goals and objectives cannot be met. In phase 4 of this planning process, we're talking about the implementation stage and the evaluation stage or control stage. So the planning process necessarily continues even after implementation. But once we've implemented, then we need to evaluate and control the system to make sure that we're on track with our performance objective actions. In other words, we need to, if we're recognizing we're off track, we need to adjust. So we utilize a planning and process system in this implementation and control phase because we want to encourage consideration of all variables that impact success or potentially impact the success. The implementation and evaluation stages provides a basis for viewing all the country markets and their interrelationships as an integrated and global unit. Okay, so with all the information developed in the planning process and a country market selected, the decision regarding the entry mode can be made. And the choice of mode of entry is one of the more critical decisions for the firm because that choice will define the organization's operations and affect all the future decisions in that market. So let's look at alternatives in terms of market entry strategies. Basically, we look at 4 different options. These 4 include exporting, contractual agreements, strategic alliances, and then direct foreign investment. And we've got a graphic here that shows that an organization might begin with direct-to-consumer communications and sales avenues online through the internet, and then they might move into the exporting phase. Licensing and franchising are examples of contractual agreements. Strategic alliances might include joint ventures or consortia arrangements, but all of these listed alternative market entries do not have the full ownership entitlement that a direct foreign investment has. And it's important to note that as we move from exporting to contractual agreements or strategic alliances and then down towards direct foreign investment, we have increasingly greater control, but also increasingly greater investment and therefore risk. Now, exporting, we're going to look at each of those 4 in turn now. Exporting may include direct exporting, where the company sells to customers in another country, or a customer, maybe an organizational customer. We can also look at indirect exporting, and here the company sells to an importer or a distributor in another country. The internet can be used as an international marketing channel, as I mentioned, and then direct sales. This is where the organization establishes an office in a foreign country, and it's particularly useful for high-tech and big-ticket industrial products. So exporting accounts for some 10% of global economic activity. early motives for exporting often are to deliberately skim the market or gain business to absorb overhead. So exporting is also a common approach for mature international markets with strong marketing and relational capabilities. While the internet might be used initially to achieve domestic sales in the market, the foreign market that you're seeking to enter, a surprisingly large number of companies started receiving orders from customers in other countries, resulting in the necessary implementation of internet marketing internationally. Direct sales may mean establishing an office with, for example, local or expatriate managers and staff, but that depends on, of course, on the size of the market and the potential sales revenue. Right, so from exporting, we look at contractual agreements. This is a long-term association between companies. It can be non-equity formed, so that just means a transfer of knowledge or skills, but generally technology, processes, trademarks and skills is part of the contract exchange. There's two main categories of contractual agreements for foreign market entry that include licensing or franchising. So looking at licensing. Licensing grants the rights to a foreign company with regards to, for example, patent rights or trademark rights, or maybe the rights to use particular technological processes that aid in the production and distribution of imported products. Licensing is a means to establish a foothold in a foreign market, and the advantage of licensing is that there's no large capital outlay and it actually lowers the risk relative to other market entry strategies. It's favoured by small and medium-sized organisations. And while licensing may be possibly amongst the least profitable ways of entering a market, the risks and the headaches are definitely less than those for direct investment. So licensing is a legitimate means of capitalising on intellectual property in a foreign market. And such agreements can also benefit the economies of the target countries. With regards to franchising, this is a contractual agreement that includes the centralization of skills and the decentralization of operations. So the franchisor provides the standard package of products, systems, and management services, so that's what's centralized. But the franchisee in the foreign market provides the market knowledge, the local market knowledge, the capital, and the personal involvement in the management processes. Key factors that influence a franchising success include monitoring costs based on physical and cultural distances, the principal's international expense, and the brand equity in the new market. Here we've got two examples of international franchises, Century 21 and KFC. Now maybe Century 21 can help you find a home with a view of the Black Sea in Istanbul in Turkey, or maybe the Colonel in Israel just across from the Red Sea in Jordan is a place to get some chicken. Strategic international alliances involve relationships between two or more organisations who seek to cooperate because they've got mutual needs and they want to share the risk in achieving a shared goals. Strategic international alliances might happen for several reasons. There may be an opportunity for rapid expansion into a new market, so basically collaborating with alliances to make that happen. Maybe it's about access to new technology or more efficient production and innovation processes. Maybe the strategic international alliance is focused on reduced marketing costs or strategic competitive moves. Strategic international alliances also enable access to additional sources of products and capital. Now, more formal than a strategic international alliance is an international joint venture. And what we're talking about here is two or more companies creating a separate legal entity. Joint ventures are acknowledged by the partners to share in the management responsibilities, and they are legally incorporated between entities, not individuals. Equity is held by each of the joint venture partners. But there's complexities involved with joint ventures. Who do you partner with? What's going to be the quality of the relationships? What about the institutional environments? Who's bringing the marketing capabilities and experience? And what about the extent to which knowledge and control are shared? So there's much negotiation involved with international joint ventures. Now, another form of strategic international alliance is a consortia. A consortia is deliberately developed to pool financial and management resources. They do this to help lessen the risks, and similar to joint ventures, consortia are different except for two things. They typically involve a large number of partners, and they frequently operate in a country or market in which none of the participants are currently active. We see consortiums operating in, for example, the construction industry, where huge construction projects are built under such arrangement, in which major contractors with different specialities form a separate organisation specifically to negotiate for, bid for, and produce one job. One firm will typically take the lead, or the newly formed corporation may actually exist independently of the originators. All right, now we get to direct foreign investment. The reasons to invest in a foreign country include capitalising on low labour costs, avoiding high import tax, reducing high transportation costs to get to the market, gaining access to raw materials and technology that otherwise would not have been the case without the direct foreign investment, and of course gaining market entry. So firms may either invest in or acquire local companies, or maybe establish new operational facilities, as these are forms of direct foreign investment. Buying up a local firm enables important benefits such as substantial technology transfers and the capability to export to a more diversified customer base. So what we're talking about there are the benefits enjoyed by the local firms that may well be involved in direct foreign investments. So when we're looking at direct foreign investment, we have to consider the factors with regards to the structure and the performance of the organisation. Timing is everything. First movers have the advantage, but first movers also have a higher risk. There's growing complexity and contingencies with regards to foreign investment contracts, and we need to consider the transaction cost structures. We also need to consider technology and knowledge transfers, as well as the degree of product differentiation. So the experiences and the cultural diversity of acquired firms is another factor affecting structure and performance, as is advertising and reputation. So a hallmark of global organisations today is the establishment of manufacturing operations throughout the world. And that's a trend that's going to increase as barriers to free trade are reduced or maybe eliminated, and therefore companies can locate manufacturing wherever it is most cost effective. Right. So when we're organising for global competition, we start with the structure of the global organisations. There's many variables to consider, and therefore devising a standard approach is difficult. It's usually structured around one of three alternatives. There may well be a global product division, or maybe a regional geographic division, such as the European division or the North American division. Or there may be a matrix structure of the organisation that consists of either of these arrangements, with centralised sales and marketing run by a centralised functional staff, or a combination of area operations and global product management. Here's an example of an organisational structure. So we've got this organisation is manufacturing cars and they're manufacturing trucks. So they've structured their organisation in terms of these two product lines. There's research and development function associated with each of these two product lines, and there's regional divisions across North America, Europe, and Africa for distribution purposes. Then within each of those regional divisions, there's an advertising function and a sales function. So when we're organising for global competition, we need to consider, where are the decisions made? What's the locus of decision making? And this is a major element of organisational strategy. Where will the decisions be made? Who makes the decision? Which method will be used to make the decision? And management policy needs to be explicit about these elements of organisational processes. So we can structure or organise for global competition in terms of centralised organisations or decentralised organisations. In the case of centralised organisations, experts are located in one place, one geography, and that gives them ability for a high degree of control on both planning and implementation. It also entails a centralisation of records and information. In a decentralised structure, there's a delegation of responsibility to regional managers, and this enables direct day-to-day contact with the market, but the disadvantage is a lack of a broad organisational view. And there you go, that's chapter 12. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.